Welcome to Chinese History and Mythology.
Hey friends, welcome back to Chinese History and Mythology. Let's briefly review the timeline of Chinese history that we have covered so far. Our story began with Pangu creating the world. The stories of Pangu, Nuwa, Quafu, Jingwei, and Shennong all belong to the ancient Chinese mythological tradition. These stories helped later generations explain the origins of the world, humanity, the natural order, and agricultural civilization. They also preserved early ideas about floods, the sun, disease, death, and survival. According to traditional Chinese historical records, the Xia dynasty existed from around 2070 to 1600 BCE. Archaeologists often associate the early Tao culture with the Xia dynasty, although the dynasty's exact dates, territory, and form of government are still debated. When we reached the Shang and Zhou dynasties, we explored how later literature imagined the fall of the Shang dynasty and the founding of the Zhou dynasty through the story of Fangshen Yanyi. Fangshen Yanyi was written during the Ming dynasty, but its story takes place more than 2,000 years earlier. For this reason, the novel and actual history need to be understood separately. The Western Zhou dynasty lasted from 1046 to 771 BCE. After the Zhou royal court moved east in 770 BCE, China entered the Eastern Zhou period. The Eastern Zhou is usually divided into the Spring and Autumn period and the Warring States period, and it lasted until 256 BCE. As the power of the Zhou royal court gradually weakened, the regional states continued to fight and absorb one another. New military systems, government institutions, agricultural technologies, and schools of thought also developed during these wars. Confucianism, Taoism, legalism, and Mohism all formed important foundations during this period. In 221 BCE, Qin Shi Huang completed the unification of China and established the Qin dynasty. The Qin dynasty fell in 207 BCE. Although this unified empire lasted for only a little more than 10 years, it established the imperial system, the commandery and county system, a standardized writing system, and a nationwide administrative structure. Even when China was divided again under later dynasties, its rulers continued trying to rebuild a similar unified order. After the fall of the Qin dynasty, China entered the brief Chu Han contention. The Western Chu regime established by Xiang Yu lasted from 206 to 202 BCE. Liu Bang eventually defeated Xiang Yu and founded the Han dynasty. The Han dynasty lasted from 202 BCE to 220 CE, with an interruption caused by the Qing dynasty established by Wang Mang. It was divided into the Western Han and Eastern Han. Lasting for more than 400 years, the Han dynasty was one of the most influential imperial periods in Chinese history. Earlier, through Romance of the Three Kingdoms, we mainly explored the stories of the late Eastern Han dynasty and the Three Kingdoms period. The novel sometimes traces the bloodline and political traditions of the Western Han imperial family. For example, Liu Bei claimed to be a distant relative of the Han imperial family, and this claim became an important political basis for his establishment of Shu Han. In 220 CE, Cao Pi replaced the Eastern Han dynasty and established Cao Wei. In 221, Liu Bei proclaimed himself emperor in Chengdu. In 229, Sun Quan formally proclaimed himself emperor. The three states of Wei, Shu, and Wu had now taken shape. So, what period came after the Three Kingdoms? After the Three Kingdoms, the next period in Chinese history was the Western and Eastern Jin dynasties. I know that after hearing such a long historical timeline, you may feel that we have finally made it through the Three Kingdoms, an age filled with legendary heroes, but also enough chaos to give anyone a headache. Surely things should have calmed down after that. Normally, when a dynasty reunites the country, it should at least have a chance to catch its breath and enjoy a few years of peace. But history took a completely unexpected turn. After the Three Kingdoms were united under Jin, China did not enter a peaceful and prosperous golden age. Instead, it entered a period that was even more unstable, more divided, and more difficult to understand. Only a little more than 30 years passed between the Western Jin's unification of China and its complete collapse. The Eastern Jin managed to survive for over a century, but it never truly returned to the Central Plains. Meanwhile, northern China fell into a situation even more chaotic than the Three Kingdoms, as a large number of non-Han regimes took turns rising to power and fighting one another with relentless violence. This was the Western and Eastern Jin period, one of the most unusual and important periods in Chinese history. I know that after hearing such a long historical timeline, you may feel that we have finally made it through the Three Kingdoms, an age filled with legendary heroes but also enough chaos to give anyone a headache. Surely things should have calmed down after that. Normally, when a dynasty reunites the country, It should at least have a chance to catch its breath and enjoy a few years of peace. But history took a completely unexpected turn. After the three kingdoms were united under Jin, China did not enter a peaceful and prosperous golden age. Instead, it entered a period that was even more unstable, more divided, and more difficult to understand. Only a little more than 30 years passed between the Western Jin's unification of China and its complete collapse. The Eastern Jin managed to survive for over a century, but it never truly returned to the Central Plains. Meanwhile, northern China fell into a situation even more chaotic than the three kingdoms, as a large number of non-Han regimes took turns rising to power and fighting one another with relentless violence. This was the Western and Eastern Jin period, one of the most unusual and important periods in Chinese history. When we turn the clock to the late 3rd century, Chinese history opens a chapter that was extremely complicated and full of contradictions, yet also filled with astonishing cultural creativity. The Western and Eastern Jin period began in 265, when Sima Yan replaced Wei and founded the Jin dynasty, and ended in 420, when Liu Yu replaced Jin and founded Liu Song. Altogether, it lasted for more than 150 years. For foreign listeners who are used to hearing Chinese history told through the rise and fall of unified empires, the Jin period may seem unfamiliar and even difficult to understand. Politically, it was deeply divided. Militarily, it was filled with bloodshed. Its social structure was rigidly divided by rank. At the same time, however, it was also a golden age of profound change in Chinese philosophy, literature, art, and religion. To truly understand the Western and Eastern Jin, we need to set aside our expectations of a powerful empire and enter a unique world shaped by powerful aristocratic clans, metaphysical philosophy and pure conversation, mass migration, and the search for spiritual freedom. In 280 CE, the Western Jin army broke through Eastern Wu's defenses, and Sun Hao, the last emperor of Wu, surrendered. The Three Kingdoms period, during which Wei, Shu, and Wu had faced one another for decades, finally came to an end. After nearly a century of division and war, China was once again ruled by a unified government. On the map, the division had ended. For ordinary people, however, true peace had only just begun to show a faint glimmer of hope. No one could have expected that this unification would last for only a little more than 10 years. It was followed by civil war within the imperial family, regional rebellions, mass migration, and a rapid succession of regimes in the north. Luoyang fell in 311, Chang'an fell in 316. In 317, the Jin court was forced to rebuild its government south of the Yangtze River. From that point onward, China entered a long period of division between north and south. To understand the Western and Eastern Jin, we first need to talk about one family, the Sima clan of Hennei. Do you remember that name? We already mentioned Sima Yi in the previous episode when we discussed the strategists of the Three Kingdoms. Through patience and careful calculation, he outlived Zhuge Liang, Cao Cao, Cao Pai, and Cao Ri. Then, during the incident at the Gaoping tombs, he turned the situation around in a single move and firmly seized control of Cao Wei. However, Sima Yi never declared himself emperor. When he died, he was still officially a minister of Wei. The people who pushed the family's ambitions further were his sons, Sima Shi and Sima Zhao. While Sima Shi held power, he deposed the emperor of Cao Wei and replaced him with someone more obedient. When Sima Zhao took control, he became even more openly aggressive. The emperor of Wei, Cao Mao, became so furious that he led several hundred servants out of the palace to attack Sima Zhao. Before he could reach his target, he was stabbed to death in public by one of Sima Zhao's men. This became an extremely famous event in Chinese history. A well-known saying later emerged from it. Sima Zhao's intentions were known to everyone on the street. It meant that his ambition was so obvious that even ordinary people passing by could see it clearly. By the time power reached Sima Zhao's son, Sima Yan, he no longer cared about keeping up the final pretense. In 266 CE, Sima Yan accepted the throne from Emperor Yuan of Wei through a formal abdication and established a new dynasty called Jin, with its capital at Luoyang. Because the dynasty later split into Western and Eastern stages, historians call this first stage the Western Jin. After its founding, the Western Jin's greatest goal was to eliminate Eastern Wu. At the time, the emperor of Wu was Sun Hao, who was famous for his cruelty and reckless behavior. He spent his days drinking and ordering executions, while officials throughout his government lost faith in him. Sima Yan spent more than 10 years preparing for war. Finally, in 280 CE, he launched a full invasion. Jin forces advanced by both land and water and quickly broke through Wu's capital, Jianye. Sun Hao surrendered. the Three Kingdoms period officially ended, and China was once again united. From this point of view, the Western Jin had a very promising beginning. It ended a century of division and warfare. Ordinary people finally no longer had to live through constant battles, and the economy slowly began to recover. Historians even use the term the Taikong era of prosperity to describe the early years of Sima Yan's reign, when the population grew, harvests improved, and trade began to recover. The founding of the Western Jin was shaped by deep political anxiety. In 265 CE, Sima Yan forced Emperor Yuan of Wei, Cao Huan, to abdicate, established the Jin dynasty, and made Luying its capital. The Sima family's path to power was filled with conspiracy and bloodshed. In particular, the incident at the Gaobing tombs, launched by Sima Yi, completely destroyed the foundations of Cao Wei's rule. The historical burden of having seized the throne through illegitimate means left the Western Jin rulers with a constant sense of insecurity. To strengthen the rule of the Sima family, Emperor Wu of Jin, Sima Yan, adopted two disastrous policies. His first policy was to grant royal titles to a large number of Sima relatives and give them extensive military and administrative power. Sima Yan naively believed that keeping power in the hands of relatives who shared the same bloodline would prevent powerful ministers from other families from seizing the throne. His second policy was to fully establish and solidify the nine-rank system. This system had originally been created during Cao Wei to select talented officials. Respected officials in different regions served as local evaluators. They ranked local candidates into 9 grades, which the imperial court then used as a basis for government appointments. By the Western Jin period, however, these rankings had come to depend entirely on family status and background. This created an extremely serious social problem. No one from a poor family could reach the highest ranks, while no one from a powerful family would be placed in the lowest. Talented people born into humble families could never enter the highest levels of government, while the children of powerful aristocratic families could easily receive high offices and generous salaries, even if they were ordinary and incompetent. This system completely fixed the social classes in place and created a large, closed group of powerful aristocratic clans. These powerful aristocratic clans are the key to understanding the history of the Western and Eastern Jin. They owned vast areas of land and controlled large dependent populations. They also monopolized education, culture, and political resources. They had an extremely high opinion of themselves and placed enormous importance on bloodline and family status. Even in daily social situations, the arrangement of seats and the choice of marriage partners were controlled by strict rules of rank. This extreme class division filled Western Jin society with hypocrisy and extravagance. After Emperor Wu of Jin, Sima Yan, united the Three Kingdoms and defeated Eastern Wu, the country experienced a short period of peace and prosperity. However, this peace did not inspire the ruling class to strengthen the country. Instead, it encouraged them to pursue pleasure without restraint. The famous story of Xi Chong and Wang Kai competing to display their wealth took place during this period. Wang Kai was the uncle of Emperor Wu of Jin. When Wang Kai washed his cooking pots with malt sugar, Xi Chong used candles as firewood. Wang Kai made a screen of purple silk that stretched for 40 li, so Xi Chong made a 50 li screen from even more expensive brocade. This meaningless display of wealth reflected the spiritual emptiness and moral collapse of the upper class at the time. They no longer cared about governing the country or the suffering of ordinary people. They cared only about physical pleasure and competing through material wealth. However, this unified dynasty had been built on a crooked foundation from the very beginning. The Sima family had seized power through usurpation, so its rulers were especially afraid that someone else might follow their example. After thinking it over, Sima Yan decided that one important reason for the fall of Cao Wei was that the imperial family had possessed no real power. Members of the royal family had been kept away from the political center, so when a crisis came, no one was able to help the emperor. Sima Yan therefore came up with a solution that now seems extremely dangerous. He granted royal titles to members of the Sima family, and these titles were not merely ceremonial. These princes held real power. They controlled armies, territories, and financial resources. Just think about it. Sima Yan had effectively placed dozens of powder kegs inside his own empire, each one ready to explode at any moment. Even worse, the successor he chose was Sima Zhong, who later became Emperor Hui of Jin. He likely had a serious intellectual disability. A very famous story says that during a famine, ordinary people had no food, and many were starving to death. When an official reported this to Emperor Hui, the emperor looked confused and asked, "Why don't they eat meat porridge? If they had no grain to eat, why did they not simply eat meat porridge instead?" This sentence became one of the most famous objects of ridicule in Chinese history. It is still used to describe a ruler who is completely disconnected from reality, and so foolish that his ignorance feels hopeless. Even a ruler of ordinary intelligence would have struggled to control dozens of princes commanding powerful armies. For an emperor like this, the task was nearly impossible. This prosperity built on sand was soon completely destroyed by a brutal civil war known as the War of the Eight Princes. In 290 CE, Emperor Wu of Jin, Sima Yan, died. His successor, Emperor Hui of Jin, Sima Zhong, had a serious intellectual disability. Historical records say that when he was told that ordinary people were starving because they had no grain, he responded by asking, "Why don't they eat meat porridge?" This strange story may have been exaggerated by later generations, but it still reflects how deeply disconnected the empire's highest ruler was from the reality of society. The emperor's inability to govern led Empress Jia Nanfeng and the imperial princes to fight a bloody 16-year struggle for supreme power. Sima Liang, Prince of Runan; Sima Wei, Prince of Chu; Sima Lun, Prince of Zhao; Sima Zhong, Prince of Qi; Sima A, Prince of Changsha; Sima Ying, Prince of Chengdu; Sima Yong, Prince of Hejian; and Sima You, Prince of Donghai. These 8 princes of the Sima family took turns entering the conflict, turning the imperial capital of Luoyang and its surrounding regions into hell on earth. The War of the Eight Princes was far more than a power struggle within the imperial family. It completely drained the Western Jin's strength and destroyed the authority of the central government. Even more dangerously, it broke the fragile balance between the dynasties of the Central Plains and the northern nomadic peoples. During the Han Dynasty and the Three Kingdoms period, military pressure from the Central Plains had led many northern nomadic groups, including the Xiongnu, Xianbei, Jie, Di, and Qiang, to move inside the Great Wall and settle along the frontier. They provided soldiers and labor for the Central Plains governments. To increase its workforce, the Western Jin government even actively recruited members of these ethnic groups. However, after the War of the Eight Princes began, rival princes brought these armed groups into the civil war to strengthen their own forces. It was like inviting wolves into the house. Once the Western Jin's central army had been exhausted by internal fighting, the leaders of these groups, who had previously held subordinate positions, saw an excellent opportunity to seize control of the Central Plains. Here, I need to explain some background for our listeners. Beginning in the late Eastern Han Dynasty, warfare and population decline in the Central Plains caused large numbers of northern nomadic and semi-farming, semi-herding peoples to migrate inward. They mainly settled in areas that are now Shanxi, Shanxi, Gansu, and Hebei. Among them were 5 major ethnic groups, historically known as the 5 Hu, the Xiongnu, Xianbei, Jie, Di, and Qiang. After moving inward, they lived alongside the Han Chinese, gradually learned farming, and began participating in the politics and military affairs of the Central Plains. However, their social status remained low, and they were often treated as cheap labor or cannon fodder. During the internal fighting among the Western Jin imperial family, rival princes tried to win the support of these Hu groups. They gave them weapons, made promises to them, and asked them to fight on their behalf. As a result, these groups became increasingly powerful during the war. Once they realized how weak the central government had become, they were no longer willing to remain supporting players. In 304 CE, the Xiongnu noble Lu Yan declared himself king of Han at Zhugoguocheng, formally beginning the period known as the upheaval of the 5 Hu. The 5 Hu referred to the 5 major northern nomadic groups, the Xiongnu, Xianbei, Jie, Di, and Qiang. Over the following decades, the Central Plains fell into unprecedented chaos and darkness. In 311 CE, Xiongnu forces captured Luoyang, the capital of the Western Jin, and took Emperor Huai of Jin prisoner. This event became known as the upheaval of Yongjia. During the conflict, Luoyang suffered devastating destruction. Large numbers of people were massacred, and the prosperous civilization of the Central Plains was reduced to ruins almost overnight. In 316 CE, Xiongnu forces captured Chang'an and took Emperor Min of Jin prisoner. The Western Jin officially came to an end. From the time Sima Yan replaced Wei and founded Jin to the fall of the Western Jin, this dynasty, which had once united the country, lasted for only 51 years. Its period of genuine peace was even more painfully brief. Faced with the advancing cavalry and brutal massacres of the northern nomadic groups, the Han Chinese of the Central Plains, especially the powerful aristocratic clans with education, wealth, and political influence, began a migration on a scale never before seen in Chinese history. This migration became known as the Southern Migration of the Robes and Caps. In ancient China, robes and caps represented the clothing of scholar officials and later came to symbolize civilization and the aristocratic class. Millions of northern Han Chinese families crossed the rough waters of the Yangtze River and fled to the relatively stable regions of the south. This mass migration completely changed China's population distribution and cultural geography. Before this period, China's political, economic, and cultural centers had always been concentrated in the central plains along the Yellow River. After the migration, large numbers of workers, advanced agricultural technologies, and deep cultural traditions were carried into the Yangtze River region and the lands farther south. This greatly encouraged the development of Jiangnan, gradually transforming the south from a vast, sparsely populated frontier into China's new economic and cultural center. The movement of China's economic and cultural center from north to south was a long process, and the southern migration of the robes and caps during the Western and Eastern Jin period marked the beginning of this historic transformation. While the north was falling into war, the political structure of the south was also undergoing a major transformation. In 317 CE, Sima Rui, a member of the Western Jin imperial family, established the Eastern Jin government in Jiangkang, which is now Nanjing. He did so with the joint support of the southern aristocratic clans and the northern clans that had migrated south. The founding of the Eastern Jin marked the beginning of a long period of confrontation between northern and southern China. However, the political environment of the Eastern Jin was completely different from that of any earlier dynasty. Sima Rui lacked personal authority and depended entirely on the most powerful northern aristocratic families that had moved south, especially the Wang clan of Langya. As a result, the Eastern Jin developed a highly unusual political system, remembered in the saying, Wang and Ma shared the realm. Here, Ma referred to the imperial Sima family, while Wang referred to the Wang clan of Langya, represented by Wang Dao and Wang Dun. Wang Dao served as chancellor at the imperial court, where he managed domestic affairs and coordinated the different political groups. Wang Dun commanded a powerful army in the upper reaches of the Yangtze River and was responsible for military defense. The emperor and the most powerful aristocratic clans formed a delicate balance of power and a system of shared rule. This system of aristocratic politics placed severe limits on the Eastern Jin emperor's power. The emperor functioned more like the symbolic leader of an alliance of aristocratic clans, while real control of the state remained in the hands of several leading families that took turns governing. In addition to the Wang clan of Langya, the Yu clan of Yingchuan, the Huan clan of Chaoguo, and the Zi clan of Chenjun all played leading roles on the Eastern Jin political stage. Although this political structure prevented the emperor from exercising extreme autocratic power, it also made factional conflict a constant part of government. Aristocratic clans frequently fought over power and resources, sometimes even starting civil wars. At the same time, because these families monopolized the highest government offices, men from humble families had almost no path to advancement. This further deepened the divisions within society. What exactly were these powerful aristocratic clans? In simple terms, they were great families whose members had served as government officials for generations, controlled education and culture, and owned large amounts of land and dependent populations. Their power came from family background, rather than personal talent or the emperor's favor. They married into one another's families, recommended one another for government positions, and protected one another's interests, creating a closed and privileged class. Throughout the Eastern Jin's history of more than a century, power remained almost entirely in the hands of a few great families. After the Wang clan of Langya came the Yu clan of Yingchuan, the Huan clan of Chaoguo, and the Zhai clan of Chenjun. These families took turns controlling the government, while the emperor was often little more than a symbol. On one hand, this political structure maintained basic stability in the south and allowed the Eastern Jin to survive for more than a century. On the other hand, it also caused serious internal conflict and weakened the dynasty's northern military campaigns. Every family that came to power placed its own interests first. Whether it supported recovering the Central Plains depended on whether that goal served the family's immediate needs. Yet within this unusual political environment, Eastern Jin culture produced something truly unique. The children of powerful aristocratic families never had to worry about making a living. They also did not need to study as hard as people from humble families who hoped to earn government positions. They had possessed almost everything from birth. As a result, they devoted a great deal of energy to spiritual and intellectual pursuits, especially pure conversation and metaphysical philosophy. Pure conversation was, in simple terms, a gathering of educated men who discuss deep and abstract philosophical questions, such as the relationship between being and non-being, or the relationship between established moral teachings and the natural way of life. They wore wide robes, waved feather fans, and spoke slowly and calmly, placing great importance on elegance, language, and quick wit. From a modern point of view, this culture may seem somewhat disconnected from reality, but it greatly advanced the development of Chinese philosophy and abstract reasoning. This metaphysical philosophy was based on the Taoist thought of Laozi and Zhuangzi, while also absorbing Confucian ethics and some ideas from Buddhism, which later entered China. It encouraged Chinese intellectuals to explore the meaning of individual life, the relationship between humanity and nature, and the conflict between freedom and restraint more deeply than ever before. Many aesthetic ideals that we now associate with traditional Chinese scholars, including a love of mountains and rivers, a desire for freedom and an unrestrained life, and a sense of distance from fame and official success, can be traced back to the metaphysical philosophy of the Eastern Jin. Against this background of political instability and the uncertainty of life, an extremely unusual cultural phenomena appeared in Chinese history. It was so distinctive that nothing quite like it had existed before, and nothing quite like it would appear again. This phenomenon became known as the Wei Jin style. For foreign listeners, understanding the Wei Jin style is essential to understanding the heart of Western and Eastern Jin culture. The Wei Jin style was not a single school of philosophy. It was a way of life, an aesthetic taste, and a spiritual attitude toward a cruel reality. Its main features can be summarized as pure conversation, taking mineral-based medicines, drinking wine, and behaving with complete freedom from social conventions. Pure conversation was the favorite social and intellectual activity of the aristocratic class. Because the political environment was extremely dangerous, even a small mistake could cost a person his life. Scholars no longer dared to discuss specific political systems and strategies for governing the country, as Confucian scholars had done during the Han Dynasty. Instead, they turned their attention to abstract philosophical questions, especially those drawn from the ideas of Laozi and Zhuangzi. They discussed the relationships between being and non-being, between the fundamental and the secondary, and between established moral teachings and the natural way of life. During these conversations, scholars held ceremonial whisks in their hands, spoke with elegance, followed careful logic, and pursued a spiritual state beyond ordinary worldly concerns. Although this fascination with abstract philosophy became disconnected from practical life to some degree, it greatly advanced Chinese philosophical reasoning and contributed to the rise of metaphysical philosophy. Taking medicine referred specifically to consuming an elixir called 5 minerals powder. It was made from 5 minerals: stalactite, purple quartz, white quartz, sulfur, and red mineral clay. At first, people regarded it as a magical medicine that could strengthen the body and extend life. After taking 5 minerals powder, however, the body produced intense heat, while the skin became extremely sensitive and could easily become damaged. To release the heat, users had to wear wide, worn-out clothing instead of tight garments. They also had to eat cold food, drink warm wine, and continue walking. This practice was known as walking to disperse the medicine. Over time, the physical reactions caused by this drug unexpectedly developed into a fashion. Wide robes with large sleeves, wooden clogs, and loose unbound hair became the standard appearance of famous Wei Jin scholars. This behavior may appear decadent, but it was also a rebellion against the strict, rigid, and restrictive Confucian rules that had shaped society since the Han Dynasty. Drinking was another important way for famous Wei Jin scholars to express their emotions and escape from reality. In the stories of the 7 sages of the bamboo grove, drinking was taken to an extreme. The 7 sages of the bamboo grove were 7 famous writers and scholars of the Wei Jin period: Jikeng, Ranji, Shantao, Shangshu, Liu Ling, Wang Rong, and Ran Shan. They often gathered beneath the bamboo trees in Shangyang, where they drank, celebrated, and sang freely. Through these actions, they expressed their dissatisfaction with the dark political climate and their longing for spiritual freedom. To reject a marriage proposal from the Sima family, Ranji remained heavily drunk for 60 days, leaving the person who came to arrange the marriage with no chance to speak. Liu Ling even wrote an essay called Ode to the Virtue of Wine. He declared that he treated heaven and earth as his house and the rooms around him as his clothes and trousers. When other people criticized him, he responded, "Why have you climbed inside my trousers?" These actions may appear absurd, but they conceal deep pain and helplessness. These men lived in an age when they could lose their heads at any moment. Traditional moral values had collapsed, and a new system of belief had not yet taken shape. They could only use alcohol and drugs to numb themselves and find a brief moment of spiritual relief. Among the 7 sages of the bamboo grove, Ji Kang was the most representative figure. He was an outstanding musician and writer, as well as a thinker with a fiercely independent character. He openly rejected the authority of Kings Tang and Wu and looked down on the teachings associated with the Duke of Zhou and Confucius, directly challenging orthodox Confucian ideas. He refused to enter government service. When his friend Shan Tao recommended him for an official position, Ji Kang wrote the famous letter severing relations with Shan Zhuyuan. In it, he listed 7 reasons why he could not become an official and 2 things that he could never tolerate. He firmly drew a line between himself and the Sima government. However, this refusal to cooperate eventually cost him his life. Sima Zhao sentenced Ji Kang to death on fabricated charges. At the execution ground, 3,000 students from the Imperial Academy submitted a joint petition asking for his pardon, but they failed to save him. Before his execution, Ji Kang remained calm. He asked for a chin and played Guangling San. Then he sighed and said, "From this day forward, Guangling San is lost forever." Ji Kang's death became the most tragic scene in the Wei Jin style. It symbolized the destruction of an independent spirit in the face of absolute power. Yet, that destruction also secured his place as an enduring spiritual icon in later Chinese culture. The Wei Jin style was far more than a personal way of life. It deeply influenced Chinese literature and art. In literature, it encouraged the early development of landscape poetry and pastoral poetry. In the arts, it advanced calligraphy, painting, and music. The most outstanding representative was Wang Shiji, whom later generations honored as the sage of calligraphy. Wang Shiji was born into the Wang clan of Langya, one of the most powerful aristocratic families. He was also a typical Wei Jin scholar, known for his free and easy personality and his lack of concern for minor social rules. In 353 CE, the 9th year of the Yonghai era, during the reign of Emperor Mu of Eastern Jin, Wang Shiji joined Zian, Sun Chuo, and 41 other famous scholars for a grand spring gathering at the Orchid Pavilion in Shanyan, Kuaiji. They sat beside a clear stream and placed cups filled with wine on the water, allowing them to float with the current. When a cup stopped in front of someone, that person had to drink the wine and compose a poem. This became the famous tradition known as floating wine cups along a winding stream. During this gathering, the guests composed a total of 37 poems. Inspired by the wine, Wang Shiji used silkworm cocoon paper and a mouse whisker brush to write a preface for the collection. This work became known as the Preface to the Orchid Pavilion Collection and was later praised as the greatest work of running script. This piece of calligraphy reached the highest level of artistic achievement, while its words also expressed the Wei Jin scholars' deep understanding of life and death. Wang Shiji wrote that when people are happy, they often forget the passage of time. But when that happiness ends and they face aging and death, they experience overwhelming sorrow. He criticized a popular idea from the philosophy of Laozi and Zhuangzi. It is absurd to treat life and death as the same, and foolish to claim that a long life and an early death are equal. He believed that treating life and death as equal was a false idea. He accepted that life is brief and death is unavoidable, but he did not encourage people to withdraw from the world in despair. Instead, he hoped to preserve the beauty of the present moment so that future generations could experience the same emotions. This deep reflection on life itself, and sincere expression of personal feeling, allowed the preface to the Orchid Pavilion collection to rise beyond the art of calligraphy and become a landmark in the history of Chinese literature. Although Eastern Jin politics was filled with internal conflict, the dynasty showed astonishing resilience when facing outside threats. In 383 CE, the Eastern Jin faced the most serious threat to its survival since the dynasty was founded, the famous Battle of the Fei River. At the time, Fu Jian, emperor of the former Qing in the north, had largely unified northern China with the help of his Han Chinese advisor Wang Meng. Fu Jian was highly ambitious. He led an army set to number 1 million men southward, hoping to destroy the Eastern Jin in a single campaign and reunify the country. Faced with such an overwhelming difference in military strength, the Eastern Jin court fell into panic. Some officials even suggested moving the capital and fleeing. However, the resistance faction, led by Chancellor Si An, firmly insisted on fighting. Si An was a leading member of the Si clan of Chenjin. He was both a political leader of the Eastern Jin and a perfect embodiment of the Wei Jin style. During the Battle of the Fei River, Si An was playing a game of Go with a guest when a report arrived from the front line. After reading it, he placed it calmly on the couch without changing his expression and continued playing. Unable to contain his curiosity, the guest asked what had happened. Si An quietly replied, "The younger men have soundly defeated the enemy." His extraordinary calmness reassured the entire imperial court and became a classic example in Chinese history of turning a military victory into an expression of elegance and composure. On the battlefield, the Eastern Jin army, commanded by Szechuan, demonstrated excellent tactical skill. The Jin forces took advantage of the former Qing army's complicated ethnic makeup and divided command. At the bank of the Fei River, they asked the Qing army to move back slightly so that the Jin troops could cross the river and fight. Fu Jian planned to attack while the Jin army was only halfway across, so he ordered his troops to retreat. However, once the former Qin army began moving back, the retreat could no longer be controlled, and its formation fell into complete disorder. The Jin army seized the opportunity, crossed the river, and launched a fierce attack. The former Qin army collapsed. As the Qin soldiers fled, even the sound of the wind and the cries of cranes made them believe that the Jin army was chasing them. This became the origin of the Chinese saying, "The wind and the cranes filled them with fear, and every tree and blade of grass looked like an enemy soldier." The Battle of the Fei River became another famous example in Chinese history of a smaller army defeating a much larger force. It preserved the Eastern Jin's territory in the south, allowing the southern economy and culture to continue developing. It also completely destroyed former Qin's dream of unification and caused northern China to fall once again into division and war. Victory at the Battle of the Fei River temporarily reduced the external pressure on the Eastern Jin, but its internal conflicts continued to grow. The power struggle among the aristocratic clans became increasingly intense and eventually allowed Huang Xuan to seize the throne. Although Liu Yu quickly defeated Huang Xuan's forces and restored the Jin dynasty, the foundations of Eastern Jin rule had already collapsed. Liu Yu was a military commander from a humble family, and his military achievements allowed him to gain real power. In 420 CE, Liu Yu deposed Emperor Gong of Jin and established the Liu Song dynasty. The Eastern Jin officially came to an end. So how did the Eastern Jin finally fall? After everything we have discussed, the answer came back to the same old problem: internal conflict. After the Battle of the Fei River, the reputations of Xian and Zhechuan reached their height, but this also aroused suspicion among the imperial family and other powerful clans. Xian voluntarily withdrew from the center of power and died soon afterward. Eastern Jin politics then fell into another round of conflict among the great families. The last man standing was a powerful military leader from a humble family named Liu Yu. Liu Yu had no distinguished family background. He climbed to power entirely through military achievements. He suppressed internal rebellions and launched several northern campaigns, at one point reaching Luoyang and Chang'an and recovering large areas of northern territory. Although these lands could not be held for long, no one could challenge Liu Yu's personal reputation or military strength. In 420 CE, Liu Yu decided that the time had come. He deposed the Eastern Jin emperor, took the throne for himself, and changed the name of the dynasty to Song. The Eastern Jin came to an end, and Chinese history entered the Northern and Southern dynasties period. As you can see, the Western and Eastern Jin period was filled with contradictions from beginning to end. It could have become one of the great unified dynasties of ancient China, yet it quickly collapsed because of building flaws in its political structure. Its collapse unexpectedly caused the first large-scale southward migration in Chinese history and helped move the country's economic and cultural center toward the south. Its aristocratic political system was rigid and corrupt, yet it produced extraordinary cultural and artistic achievements. The Eastern Jin survived in only one part of the country and suffered from constant internal conflict. Yet at the Battle of the Fei River, it displayed astonishing unity and stopped the cavalry armies of the north. Northern China experienced one rapid change of government after another, while Han Chinese and Hu people suffered through killing and oppression. Yet during this long and painful process, different ethnic groups also entered a period of deep contact and integration. The Xiangnu, Xiangbei, Jie, Di, and Chang were once active throughout northern China. Over the centuries of the Western and Eastern Jin and the Northern and Southern dynasties, most gradually became part of the Han Chinese population. Their languages, clothing, music, and food customs also deeply influenced later Chinese culture. Many foods we eat today, many styles of clothing, and even many words still carry traces left by that age of cultural integration. In the final years of the Eastern Jin, political corruption and frequent warfare caused another profound shift in people's spiritual lives. The famous scholars of the early Wei Jin period had tried to find spiritual freedom through pure conversation and behavior free from social conventions. By the end of the Eastern Jin, however, writers began turning their attention toward nature and inner peace. The greatest representative of this period was Tao Yongming, who became known as the founding master of reclusive poetry. Tao Yongming was born into a declining family of government officials. He entered government service several times but could never tolerate the hypocrisy and darkness of official life. Eventually, while serving as the magistrate of Pingze County, he refused to sacrifice his dignity for a small government salary by flattering a supervising official. He resigned without hesitation and returned to his hometown of Chaisang in Sunyang. Tao Yongming's greatness came from his creation of the pastoral poetry tradition in Chinese literary history. His poems contained no ornate language and no difficult philosophical arguments. Instead, they offered honest descriptions of rural life and heartfelt praise for the natural world. In one of his most famous scenes, he gathers chrysanthemums beside the eastern fence and quietly looks toward the southern mountains. These lines came to represent the highest ideal of spiritual freedom and inner peace for generations of Chinese scholars. In addition to poetry, Tao Yongming also wrote the famous prose work, The Peach Blossom Spring. In this story, he imagined an ideal society completely isolated from the outside world. There was no war, no exploitation, and no heavy taxation. People lived peaceful and secure lives and treated one another with kindness. The Peach Blossom Spring became much more than a literary image. It expressed the desperate longing for peace among ordinary people, suffering through an age of chaos, while also serving as a silent protest against the darkness of the real world. Tao Yongming's choice showed that when Chinese intellectuals faced political hardship, they could turn inward to find spiritual support. This desire to withdraw into the countryside and pursue inner peace deeply influenced later generations of Chinese writers and scholars. During the Western and Eastern Jin period, alongside native Chinese metaphysical philosophy and Taoism, a foreign religion rapidly spread across China and became deeply rooted. That religion was Buddhism. Buddhism had already entered China during the Han Dynasty. During the Western and Eastern Jin, however, long wars, social instability, and the uncertainty of life created an urgent need for a belief system that could provide spiritual comfort and hope for the afterlife. Buddhist ideas of karma and reincarnation filled the enormous spiritual emptiness experienced by many people at the time. The spread of Buddhism during this period had several important features. The first was the systematic translation of Buddhist scriptures. Eminent monks from the Western regions, including Fo Tudang and Kumarajiva, came to China and organized large translation projects with support from the ruling courts. They translated complex Buddhist scriptures into elegant Chinese, allowing Chinese intellectuals to understand and accept Buddhist thought. The second feature was the integration of Buddhism with native Chinese culture. To adapt Buddhism to the Chinese social environment, Buddhist thinkers began using terms from the philosophy of Laozi and Zhuangzi to explain Buddhist teachings. This method became known as matching concepts. This cultural compromise and integration laid the foundation for Buddhism eventually becoming an important part of traditional Chinese culture. This period also produced a great monk who traveled in search of Buddhist teachings, Faxian. In 399 CE, Faxian was already in his 60s when he made the determined decision to leave Chang'an in search of complete Buddhist monastic rules. He crossed vast deserts and snow-covered mountains and traveled to India, the birthplace of Buddhism. He spent many years traveling through India and copying large numbers of Buddhist scriptures before returning to China by sea. Faxian's journey west took place more than 2 centuries before the famous journey of Xuanzang. His experiences were recorded in a record of Buddhist kingdoms. This work became both a great religious document and a valuable historical source for the study of ancient Central and South Asian history and geography. Faxian's extraordinary journey demonstrated the astonishing determination and courage shown by Chinese people in their search for truth and faith. As Buddhism flourished, Buddhist art also began developing rapidly across China. To worship Buddhist images and conduct religious ceremonies, people began carving grottos into cliffs. Although the famous Yonggang grottos and Longmen grottos were mainly created later during the Northern Wei dynasty, the construction of the Mogao caves at Dunhuang began in the second year of the Jianyuan era under former Qin in 366 CE. A monk named Lezun saw a brilliant golden light shining over Mingsha Mountain, as though 1,000 Buddhas had appeared before him. He then carved the first cave into the cliff. From that moment, the Mogao caves began a history of construction that continued for 1,000 years. The murals and sculptures inside these caves displayed the dignity and sacred nature of Buddhism while combining Chinese and Western artistic styles. They became a brilliant treasure within the cultural heritage of the world. After the 3 kingdoms came the Western and Eastern Jin. and after the Jin came the Northern and Southern dynasties. The story of the Northern and Southern dynasties began when Liu Yu established the Liu Song dynasty and continued until the Sui dynasty reunified the country. Between those two events came more than 160 years of division. That is another sweeping chapter of Chinese history. Looking back over the 150 years of the Western and Eastern Jin, we find an age filled with enormous tension. Politically, it was divided, unstable, and soaked in blood. The Western Jin's brief unification and rapid collapse, the brutality of the War of the Eight Princes, the dark years of the Five Hu upheaval, and the internal conflict caused by Eastern Jin aristocratic politics all made this period appear extremely fragile and chaotic. Yet within this terrible disorder and suffering, the inner core of Chinese culture underwent a profound transformation. From the founding of the Western Jin in 266 CE to the fall of the Eastern Jin in 420, the two Jin dynasties lasted for more than 150 years altogether. The Western Jin briefly unified the country, but it quickly collapsed because of civil war within the imperial family, an unstable political system, and the growing military power of regional forces. The Eastern Jin survived for more than a century by relying on the Yangtze River defenses, the population that had migrated south, cooperation among aristocratic clans, and the Beifu army. However, it never succeeded in regaining control of the entire north. If we judge the Western and Eastern Jin only by the results of unification and warfare, this period may appear to be filled with failure. But when we take a broader view, we can see that the Jin period completed many historical transformations that deeply influenced later generations. Large parts of China's population migrated south, and the economy of Jiangnan began developing more rapidly. In the north, several ethnic groups established governments, laying the foundation for the wider cultural integration of the Sui and Tang periods. Buddhism established stable monastic communities, translation projects, and networks of believers, while Taoism gradually developed into a mature religious system. Metaphysical philosophy and pure conversation changed the way educated people discussed the individual, nature, and society. Calligraphy, figure painting, literature, and aesthetic thought began placing greater emphasis on personal expression. The powerful aristocratic clans reached the height of their influence, while also exposing the problems created when political resources were monopolized by a small number of families. The historical legacy of the Western and Eastern Jin can still be found in the city of Nanjing today. It can be found in the calligraphic tradition of Wang Shiji, in the pastoral literature represented by Tao Yuanming, and in the differences and connections that gradually developed between the cultures of northern and southern China. The Western and Eastern Jin period weakened the intellectual restrictions created by the official promotion of Confucianism since the Han Dynasty. The rise of metaphysical philosophy moved Chinese thought beyond specific questions of ethics and morality and toward abstract philosophical reasoning. Although the Wei Jin style contained elements of decadence and escape, it greatly awakened individual self-awareness. People began paying more attention to their inner emotions, the value of life, and spiritual freedom. Calligraphy, painting, and literature all made major breakthroughs during this period, establishing many of the basic aesthetic patterns of classical Chinese art. At the same time, mass migration and cultural integration brought tremendous suffering, but they also introduced new influences into Chinese civilization and encouraged exchange between northern and southern cultures. The arrival and localization of Buddhism greatly enriched the spiritual world of the Chinese people and influenced almost every part of later Chinese philosophy, literature, and art. Faced with the possibility that death could arrive at any moment, the writers and scholars of the Western and Eastern Jin did not surrender completely to despair. Through pure conversation, poetry, calligraphy, and music, they created a spiritual refuge of their own. They showed us that even in the darkest age, humanity's pursuit of beauty, search for truth, and desire for freedom cannot be taken away. The history of the Western and Eastern Jin is like a painting filled with intense colors and powerful contrasts. On one side stands the brutal reality of armored armies and rivers of blood. On the other stands the calm elegance of wide robes and wine cups floating along a winding stream. On one side lies the luxury and corruption of the powerful aristocratic clans. On the other lies the peaceful image of Tao Yuanming gathering chrysanthemums beside the eastern fence. This unity of extreme contradictions is what makes the Western and Eastern Jin so fascinating. The period did not have the grand imperial story of the Qin and Han dynasties, nor did it have the magnificent courts of the Sui and Tang, where envoys arrived from many lands. Yet, in an extraordinarily delicate and profound way, it reached into the deepest parts of the human soul. So, If you see the Western and Eastern Jin as nothing more than a dark and chaotic age, you are greatly underestimating it. This period was a crucible that Chinese history had to pass through between the great unifications of the Qin and Han and the later unifications of the Sui and Tang. The old political system had collapsed while a new one was still taking shape. The old population distribution had been broken apart, while a new economic structure was beginning to form. Old cultural beliefs had been shaken, while new ideas were beginning to grow. On the surface, the sons of Eastern Jin aristocratic families appeared to spend their time discussing emptiness and ignoring worldly affairs. Yet without realizing it, they completed an extremely important historical task. They preserved the flame of Central Plains culture and carried it into Jiangnan, where it took root in new soil and grew into a completely different form. The regimes founded by the Hu peoples in the north brought endless suffering, but they also brought new influences and powerful vitality. These northern and southern forces remained divided and opposed, yet both were building the energy that would eventually make reunification possible. China did experience unification after the end of the Three Kingdoms. That unification was extremely brief, but it triggered even larger waves of migration, integration, and institutional change. The Jin dynasty failed to restore a stable empire like the Han, but it pushed China into an age of reorganization. Next, the stage of history will officially enter the northern and southern dynasties. In the south, Liu Song, Southern Qi, Liang, and Chen will succeed one another in Jiangkang. In the north, the Northern Wei, founded by the Tuoba branch of the Xianbei, will unify northern China and introduce a series of far-reaching reforms. Buddhist grottos, ethnic integration, the movement of capitals, and new military systems will also gradually transform China during this period. For now, this is where we will leave the story of the Western and Eastern Jin. To be honest, this period contains an overwhelming amount of information. From the Sima family's seizure of Wei, to the Western Jin's brief unification, the War of the Eight Princes, the upheaval of Yongjia, the southern migration of the aristocracy, the Battle of the Fei River, and finally Lu Yu's replacement of Jin, the entire story feels like a political meat grinder running at full speed. I imagine that you, sitting on the other side of the screen, may also need a moment to catch your breath and step away from the heavy stories of war, killing, political alliances, and constant struggles for power. So we are not going to rush directly into the northern and southern dynasties. Before entering that even more divided age of confrontation between north and south, another world is waiting for us, a world even stranger and more magnificent. It grew out of the unique cultural environment of the Western and Eastern Jin, where metaphysical philosophy, pure conversation, Buddhism, Taoism, and folk beliefs became deeply connected. It recorded countless stories about immortals, ghosts, supernatural spirits, karmic retribution, strange creatures, and extraordinary people. This book became an essential landmark in the history of Chinese supernatural fiction. It was in search of the supernatural, or in search of the supernatural. During the Eastern Jin, a court historian named Gan Bao collected a large number of stories about gods, ghosts, prophecies, people returning from the dead, karmic retribution, animals changing form, and encounters between humans and the supernatural world. He compiled them into a work called In Search of the Supernatural. In Search of the Supernatural belongs to an ancient Chinese literary tradition known as ziguai. The word ziguai means recording events that are unusual, strange, or impossible to explain through ordinary experience. The book has no single main character and no central plot that runs from beginning to end. Instead, it is made up of many short stories. These stories came from historical rumors, local legends, folk beliefs, and strange accounts collected by the author. Even more importantly, Gan Bao was himself a historian. He understood the imperial court and its political system, and he also participated in writing the history of the Jin dynasty. So why would a man responsible for recording the history of the state take stories about ghosts and spirits so seriously? Did he regard them as literary legends, or did he believe that they had actually happened? And what do the gods, ghosts, and monsters in Search of the Supernatural reveal about the social fears, moral values, and beliefs about life and death during the Western and Eastern Jin period? These stories later had a profound influence on Chinese supernatural fiction, tales of the marvelous, and folk legends. From romances between humans and ghosts and the dead returning to life, to animals taking human form and good and evil eventually receiving their proper rewards, many story elements that still appear in Chinese fantasy today can be traced back to In Search of the Supernatural. Later works such as Liao Jai Ziyi or Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio, as well as countless myths, plays, and folk stories, continued this literary tradition in different ways. Many people think that mythology belongs to the childhood of human civilization, when early societies used simple explanations to understand the natural world. However, In Search of the Supernatural appeared under completely different circumstances. It emerged during an age when philosophy was highly developed and culture was flourishing, yet society was also filled with extreme despair. Gan Bao, the Eastern Jin historian who compiled the book, wanted to prove to the world that the existence of ghosts and spirits was real. In this book, you will hear tragic love stories that cross the boundary between life and death. You will encounter birds and animals that take human form, along with strange events that break the physical laws of the world. On the surface, these stories are about ghosts, demons, and supernatural creatures. Underneath, they reflect the anxiety people felt about the shortness of life, their desire to cross rigid social boundaries, and their need for fantasy to resolve conflicts that the real world could not solve. In the world of In Search of the Supernatural, humans and ghosts can sit at the same table and drink together. Fox spirits can sacrifice everything for love, dry bones can return to life, and ancient trees can speak. This strange and dazzling imagination became a spiritual refuge that writers of the Western and Eastern Jin created for themselves and for later generations. Why would a historian choose to write ghost stories? That question alone is fascinating. In Search of the Supernatural contains stories about Dong Yong and the Seventh Fairy, the son of Gan Jiang and Mo Ye avenging his father, and Han Ping and his wife becoming trees of mutual longing after death.
It also includes stories about fox spirits, snake spirits, tree spirits, water gods, and the kitchen god. These stories may appear strange and absurd, but beneath them lie the real attitudes of people from that age toward life and death, good and evil, love, justice, and fate. So in the next episode, we will open this Chinese collection of ghost and supernatural stories written more than 1600 years ago. We will discover how people living during the real and brutal world of the Western and Eastern Jin imagined another world beyond their own. In the next episode, let us open this ancient collection of strange accounts and enter a fantastic world where humans and gods, spirits and mortals can share the same room. We will search for the real humanity hidden beneath these extraordinary stories and learn how ancient Chinese people used supernatural imagination to soothe the wounds of the world in which they lived. Stay tuned for our next episode. I will meet you in the world of In Search of the Supernatural. If you enjoyed today's episode, feel free to give the show a like, subscribe, and share it with someone you think would enjoy it too. Thank you for spending this time with me. I will see you in the next episode.
The sky in light, Nua healed the broken heart. Fuxi traced the world's design. Every age leaves stories bright. Yaya dynasty shaped bronze. Shang dynasty cast oracle bones. Thou dynasty built right. Qin dynasty forged the great walls. Han dynasty opened Silk Road winds. Three kingdoms dynasty turned war to tales. Jin dynasty led ink and mountains bloom. Sui dynasty carved the Grand Canal. Tang dynasty crowned the world with art. Song dynasty raised learning's flame. Yuan dynasty swept the northern plains. Ming dynasty strengthened walls again. Qing dynasty closed an ancient end. Every age leaves stories bright. History lands bloom. Sui dynasty carved the Grand Canal. Tang dynasty crowned the world with art. Song dynasty raised learn